Tell me where you grew up and how you got into golf.
You know, my journey into golf started as an accident. My family and I took a spring vacation down to Hilton Head Island. We were actually staying on a house on Harbor Town the week of the PGA Tour, the MCI Heritage Classic in '92. And you know, golf back in that era, at least in my perception, was an older man's sport. So it was tough to get me to go out and watch golf. But once they got me out there, I was so captivated by just the sounds of live golf, the metal spikes, persimmon woods back then in '92. And we stood on a par 5 tee and watched the guys hit drivers, and that's what really first got me into golf, was watching a drive just sail out of sight. And then one of the younger players at the time, you know, he's about 27 or 28, came around and hit a drive farther than anybody else, and he was younger, so he made it look fun for a kid my age. I was 14 at the time, and we followed him around through the whole weekend, and he ended up winning that week, and you know, immediately became my favorite player at the time. That was Davis Love, you know, who won that tournament now, I think 5 or 6 times.
Right.
So for me coming home, that was my inspiration to get into golf. And whenever Davis would play, I'd VCR and I'd watch whatever he was doing, from how he was playing, swinging, holding himself, mannerism, how he talked. Everything I wanted to do was to be like Davis. So that was the start of my journey in golf.
So Davis Love is the reason you got into golf. He's your childhood hero. He's the swing you practiced. And now he's captain of the Ryder Cup team. Did you know that when you took the job here at Hazeltine?
When I got the call, I mean, it was the biggest job that I had ever interviewed for. It's my first head professional job, and on the next Ryder Cup in the States is going to be here. So we're excited beyond belief. You know, if there's anybody that I could have handpicked to be our captain here in '16, it would have been Davis. But I also know the history of this, is that no losing captain has ever gotten to repeat twice for the Americans. But then 2014 happens. The USA team goes to Glen Eagles, gets beat again. We've now lost 8 of the last 10 Ryder Cups, and everyone's getting tired of losing. Not long after that, the PGA came out and announced a task force. The task force was tasked with, how do we start winning this thing again? And it involved players like Davis. Tiger and Phil were in it, Ricky Fowler, Tom Lehman, Ray Floyd, Jim Furyk, to name a few. What came out of it was they named Davis to be captain again. And I think just from a business standpoint, there's something to be said from, as a leader, you don't always win the first time. You know, sometimes it takes losing to understand how to win. And Davis was the choice that made the most sense at that point. In 2016, he had the respect of the players, and I think he felt like, if everyone wants me to do this again, I'll do it. You know, he was the most natural fit. Everyone wanted to see Davis get a second chance at it. I think they all felt like they let him down at Chicago. I think the players were looking for a chance to have some redemption with Davis. I think Davis, just as a captain, wanted a second chance at it too.
So they changed their culture quite a bit during that time. And they also prepared completely differently for the Ryder Cup here at Hazeltine. So take us through that, Chandler.
There's one moment that I saw in 2015 that I think started to change things for us heading into 2016. We got to remember, in 2015, Jordan Spieth wins the Masters at age 21. He goes up to Washington, he wins the US Open at Chambers Bay, and he goes to the Old Course with a chance to win 3 majors in a row, and everyone's talking about, is Jordan Spieth the next coming up Bobby Jones? Jordan comes really close to winning that one. He comes up 1 shot shy of being in a playoff, which eventually was won by Zach Johnson. The funny thing about the timing of it was that Davis Love had made his first visit to Hazeltine that week. So as the playoff was ending, I was in the locker room with Davis, and we're watching Jordan just come up short, and then Zach goes on to win. And as he's coming off the Old Course there on 18 green, the first player to come out and congratulate him is Jordan Spieth. And in that moment, I think I kind of looked at Davis and I said, look at the leadership of this 21-year-old. To have our top player at the time, Jordan Spieth, go out and acknowledge another American for winning, it's something we really hadn't seen. We hadn't seen that from Tiger or Phil. They were such rivals. They would never congratulate each other for something like that or acknowledge each other. But for Jordan to do that, and then Jordan actually flew home on the plane with Zach that night, and to see them celebrating the win together, I think was just a start in the change of the culture for Team USA. To see this tight-knit group amongst the Americans was something we really hadn't seen. You know, these guys all want to hang out together when they go to different championships, and we never used to see that 10 years ago.
Wow.
They're all rooting for each other at this point. They all want to beat each other, but when an American wins, they all celebrate together.
Strategy is really important, and I think people don't quite understand the strategy, the options that a captain has as the home team captain to set up the course.
I would have tried to be as prepared as I can for any captain they would have named, but to know that it's my childhood hero, I started looking for, what is Davis going to ask me, and how could I help the team win? The golf course is really the one area that he would ask questions about, or that I could make suggestions about, to give him the best chance of winning. And so I went back and started watching the last 20 years, and specifically the losses. Why do we lose? Is there something that we could have done differently to prepare for or be ready? Why do teams win? So Davis shows up in 2015 and asked me to play, and I kind of had my homework done by that point. And as we started to have the conversation about what are we going to do at Hazeltine? I started asking him, I said, why do you think we lost in 14? Just to see what he thinks the answers are. And I think the popular perception of why we lost 2 years prior at Glen Eagles was we were terrible at alternate shot. There were 8 points in play for foursomes alternate shot, and we lost 7-1. So simple, we just got to fix alternate shot, right? My point to him was, within that alternate shot, we really weren't that bad. On par 3s and 4s, we were right about even. We got crushed on the par 5s at Glen Eagles, and it wasn't even close. You could take Saturday afternoon foursomes, for example. The Europeans were combined 8 under on par 5s, and the Americans were combined 4 over. So we start then going inside some of the cause and effect that goes within that, and started looking at what is the strength of the European players and what is the strength of the American players. And as we talked about that in relation to par 5s, in Glen Eagles, they played the par 5s really short. And Europe has some of the great mid to long iron players in the game. So their alternate shot pairings, tend to put second shot in the hands of players like Sergio Garcia and Justin Rose and Graham McDowell and Lee Westwood that are all great mid to long iron players. And they all had a great driver hitting the tee shot for them on those par 5s. We've got some of the best wedge players in the world. We would get to the 3rd hole and Davis is just trying to take in the golf course, and we walked back to the tee, and the back tee on the 3rd hole at Hazeltine, it's a par 5 at 630 yards. And his initial comment was, well, we'll play back here today, but we're probably not going to use this tee for the Ryder Cup. So it's telling me that he's already given some thought to where he wants to put the tees down. In the Ryder Cup, the home course captain can set up everything from where we put the tees down every given session, where we're going to put the hole locations every given session, how narrow the fairways are going to be, how long the rough is going to be. Do we want to mow the rough around the greens, going into the bunkers? Every condition is really controlled by the home team, so we should talk about this. And I guess my point to him was, is playing shorter par 5s really our strength, given what we learned at Glen Eagles? And then also looking at the strength of the potential 8 players that would be on his team right now. We've got some of the best wedge players, so playing long par 5s really may not be a disadvantage for us. If we set the holes back so long, and we have 3 par 5s at Hazeltine that can play 630 yards or more, it might be to the advantage of the Americans because it'll lend towards a lot of wedge play. And I think I give Davis a lot of credit for a guy who's been a captain before. He was willing to take a step back and look at it from a new perspective and listen to other ideas, even from people like myself or from people at the task force, and really put it through a filter of, would this work? And I think that conversation was just the start of it. You'll find out these days that you can only set so many holes so far back. I think Brooks Koepka and Rory McIlroy were still getting to some of those in 2. So you can't defend against some players, but the majority of the field was playing those shots. And we want to get wedge in our players' hands more than the Europeans. We felt like if it's a wedge contest, we had an advantage. If it's a long iron contest, they might have an advantage with players like Rory and Sergio and Keimer and Rose and Stenson. And actually it was a wedge shot that I think really kind of changed the momentum of the Ryder Cup. If you go back to Saturday afternoon, Patrick Reed has a wedge shot on hole number 15, which played at 6. He's about 100 yards out, holes it for eagle, ignites the whole crowd, really sent a boost of energy to the American side, and they took off after that.
What were some of your favorite moments from 2016, from the tournament itself?
The culture of the team was changing based on the actions that I think Jordan Spieth had in 2015 and 2016. And there was a group text going on amongst the players and the captains. It was called Return the Cup. And it was going on in all the weeks leading up to the Ryder Cup. And I'm wondering, are we going to play timid, or are we going to continue to keep the pedal down? And I think the tone of the team the whole week was, have fun. First text on Sunday morning to the rest of the team came from Jordan Spieth. It was a great quote. Fate whispers to the warrior, you won't survive the storm. The warrior responds, I am the storm. And I think he started to realize pretty quick that this team has a completely different outlook on how to approach the final round of a Ryder Cup. There was a moment there on Saturday night. I was walking with the Reed and Spieth match against Rose and Stenson late on Saturday, and Reed was really taking over. He had just birdied 14 and 15 to put them up 3 with 3 to go, and then he hits the 16th green, the par 5 and 2, and the place is just roaring. The weather was perfect. We were walking down the fairway, and I kind of stopped about 100 yards out and just watched the whole group go onto the green, and Patrick Reed's got everyone standing up and cheering for him at that point. And I was soaking in that moment, and as I did, I looked at the Jumbotron over by what was the 17th green at the time. There was still one match out there, and it was Ryan Moore and J.B. Holmes against Lee Westwood and Danny Willett. And that match was still close. The Americans were 1 up on 18, and I knew they were getting close to finishing the match. And I look over, and I saw Westwood on the Jumbotron over a putt about this long. And I'm watching Patrick Reed at the same point. I'm wondering why Lee Westwood is putting a 2-foot putt when he's down in the match. And it dawns on me that that's going to be to win the hole and have the match, and that's a big half point at that time. And as I'm kind of watching Patrick and looking at that, Lee hits the putt, and I see it go right by the hole. And I see them start shaking hands, and at that time, Zach Johnson and Jimmy Walker had driven up in the cart next to me, and we're standing alongside, amongst all this noise, and that happens. And in that moment, it just felt different. It felt like, for all the Ryder Cups that I've watched from a kid to 2016, it seems like the Americans are the team that misses that short, crucial putt. And to see Westwood miss that putt and see it go the other way, in that moment, it just felt different. It felt like this one was actually going to go our way, and that's the moment we started feeling pretty good about things. When the event ended on Sunday night, the American team was celebrating by the 18th green. They were spraying the crowd with champagne. And Davis came over and gave me a hug after we realized that we had won. I think one of the scary things about the Ryder Cup, as a host site, is somebody once described it very well. They said, you feel like you're getting into an elevator and you don't know if it's going to go up or down. So in that moment, when Davis is giving me a hug, it's finally starting to sink in that USA actually got a win out of this. And we haven't seen many of those in the last 20 years. So we go over the bridge. I got a chance to look out the crowd and soak that in and get to celebrate with him for a couple of seconds. I realized just how lucky I am to have gone through this with Davis and to have a family that was so supportive, leading up to the whole 4 years of getting here and going through the Ryder Cup.
That's a special moment. Wow.
Hazeltine's unique when you look at its place in golf history. We think about Northeast clubs that have been around for about 100 years, and Hazeltine, compared to a lot of those clubs, is still a baby. We opened up in 1962. Todd Heffelfinger, who was a former USGA president, was a member at Minnetonka at the time. And post-war, we just hadn't seen the major championships come back to Minnesota. Pre-war, World War II, we saw Interlock and Minnetonka have two of those great moments with Bobby Jones and the US Amateur in 26 and the US Open in 30. But we hadn't had the big championships come back yet, and that was really Todd's dream. And he came all the way out to Chaska for a land grab there in the late 50s. And then he enlisted Robert Trent Jones to be our architect and design a golf course that was suitable for the conduct of national championships and to attract a membership that really supported that mission. And we started in 1966 with the Women's Open, had the men come here 8 years after our opening in 1970. In 2028, when Hazeltine gets to host the Ryder Cup for the second time, it'll be the first American site to have hosted the Ryder Cup twice, and it's a rare honor. You look at this tournament that started in 1926, only gets played every 4 years in the United States, so to be able to do this twice in 12 years is quite an honor. Brant Snedeker shared a great story of what happened on Sunday night in the team locker room. So the Americans had been celebrating for a while. They went down to the media tent, they'd done their press conference, and they went back to the locker room and they were packing up their lockers and they were getting ready to head to the hotel for dinner that night. And Tiger Woods called the players together. He says back in 1999, then they had the big comeback victory of the Europeans at Brookline. We get back to the hotel that night, we have dinner, we have drinks, we're celebrating, and by about 10:30 I had nothing left. So I went up to my room and I got in bed. And about half an hour later, somebody's knocking on my door and they're not going away. So Tiger answered the door and it was Payne Stewart. Payne says, "What are you doing?" Tiger says, "I got nothing left. Hey, you guys go ahead without me." Payne says, "Yeah, none of us have got nothing left, so what? Let's go. Get downstairs." "No, Payne, it's okay, really, you guys go ahead. Not leaving without you." He said, "Tiger, the reason you go back downstairs right now is you never know if you'll ever have this again." And Tiger says he remembers thinking, "You're nuts. I've played 2 Ryder Cups, we won this year, we're probably going to win every year, if not every other year after this." But he said, "I'm really glad that I got dressed and went down and enjoyed the rest of the night with the guys, because to this date, that's the only winning Ryder Cup team that Tiger's ever been on." And we lost Payne Stewart 3 weeks later. The message that Tiger was trying to send to the guys is, celebrate when you win, because you never know if you'll ever have this again. Don't miss the moment to celebrate. Don't look on to the next one so quick. So when you actually get to the top of the hill, look around and enjoy it.
People don't know that the Club Pro actually has a chance to work with the captains because it's his course and he knows it extremely well. So was there anything that you shared with the captains of the team other than the par 5s that they really took to heart?
We have this group called Scouts Inc., and they're preparing weekly reports for the captains, and I'm looking at them and we're talking with Tom Lehman about it because he's involved with course logistics as well. One thing we felt that hinders Team USA is that we tend to play things very safe. We make the safe captain's picks, we make the safe pairings. Even though we know we probably shouldn't do things in our gut, we do it because it's safe. And one of the members of Scouts Inc. actually used to work for the CIA. And he used to study how other countries prepare for war. And what he found in all his years was that European countries would take more risk when it comes to war strategy versus Americans. We like high percentage plays and we really don't like being second guessed. So we felt like we needed to push the captains outside of their comfort zone a little bit. In one of the last reports that I sent to Tom Lehman, all right, here's all the numbers and here's what the numbers say should happen, but it's not a guarantee of what will happen. Somewhere in here, I believe you guys are gonna have to do something that doesn't make sense. You're gonna have to go against the grain, whether it's a captain's pick, whether it's a pairing, etc., that don't go in line with the numbers. And I'd seen this quote by Herb Brooks, the legendary hockey coach here in Minnesota, coached Team USA in 1980. Risk something or sit forever with your dreams. And it was risky for me to kind of poke the captains with that kind of quote, but we needed them to just think outside the box a little bit with their strategy and just take some chances. As we look back at how that we played out, they did take some chances. It turned out really well. A couple weeks after the tournament ends, I get this package in the mail from Tom Lehman, and it's heavy, you know, like it's got some weight to it. And open the package, and it's got a nice note from Tom Lehman. It had a steel plate, which included that quote. So we made a gift out of it for all the players and the captains, and we felt like you should have one too. So it was one of the great gifts I got in the wake of the Ryder Cup.